We are live. It is the seventh month, the sixth day of the year 2017. I appreciate you coming out this evening, spending your time with us. It is always an honor to be here with you. I don't take it lightly that you take the time out of your life to listen to this. Now, not necessarily because it's live, though I appreciate it, but even if you're listening to one of the recordings, it's still time out of your life. I appreciate it very much. But it is a concern to me that I make sure that the time you spend is well spent. So I work very hard to make sure that it is not a waste of your time. We're going to go over not as many topics tonight. We're going to go over a brief overview of what 3Believe is. 3Believe is a system, a lifestyle really, of how to manage the symptoms of metabolic syndrome. Now, all of you should know them by heart, but just in case you've forgotten, metabolic syndrome is defined medically as having any combination of the following issues: being overweight or obese, having elevated blood pressure or cholesterol, elevated glucose levels or diabetes, and a fatty liver. Unfortunately, the sad news is that 8 out of 10 people, the people you love, ones that you care about, people you even see on the street driving past you, have at least one of the symptoms that I just mentioned. It is considered by the CDC to be an epidemic. Now, something that is an epidemic is growing at such large proportions that the CDC says it's out of control. And sadly, that has been the case for a couple of decades now. And it is growing faster now than it has ever grown before. And you know what's sad is that we love the American lifestyle. It's not perfect. It has its faults. However, it's the greatest nation in the world, I believe. And that's why I live here. But some of the American traditions that we have are being passed on to our brother and sister countries around the world that aren't so good. Let me give an example. The fastest growing nation of type 2 diabetes is India. Why? Well, it's the same reason as the third fastest growing nation of type 2 diabetes is Mexico. And the reason why is because those two countries, the more prosperous they become in their cities, the more middle class people that they have, making more money, earning a better living for their families, they mimic the American lifestyle. They eat the foods that we eat. They get more imports. Even their traditional foods and their customs start to change. They get fast food restaurants like KFC and Pizza Hut and McDonald's. And that is not a good nutritional tradition that the Americans should be sharing. And for that very reason, their people are getting fatter, they're getting higher levels of heart disease, of type 2 diabetes, of cancer, of stomach disorders, basically everything that I outlined as being a symptom of metabolic syndrome. So, our goal here is to spread the good news of how we can overcome what caused metabolic syndrome. Now, it wasn't because grandma and grandpa had bad genes and it passed it on to your parents and it passed it on to you. That's not the reason. We literally ate our way to the symptoms of metabolic syndrome. The good news is that medical science has identified that we can eat our ways back out. All we have to do is get a macro balance of the nutrients that we consume, the macro balance of the proteins, fats, and carbohydrates, and we get a good shot in our arm of some of the other micronutrients for our bodies, vitamins and minerals, and fibers and live enzymes, things like that. And we're going to be doing pretty well. We're going to be living a long, healthy life. And that's what our pursuit is. We've been doing this for almost 10 years. We've been doing it under another name. We've been selling it to doctors and clinics all over the country, and we've been doing very well. We've been growing at a steady pace. Doctors every day, PhDs in the field of nutrition, constantly tell us, what in the world have you guys been doing? How are you able to have cutting edge technology when you're a small company, relatively small, and yet you have been able to get products, tap into a formulas that some of the largest multinational, multi-billion dollar companies have not been able to produce? Well, one, as I say with a smile, but no joke, it is by the grace of God, and it is by diligence to a simple principle, and that is caring more about the quality of the product than caring about the profits that it produces. I believe that if we take care of you, you'll take care of those that you love, and somehow, somewhere down the line, it'll just take care of us. And that model has seemed to work pretty well. And so I ask you to do the same. Don't care about your own finances. Don't care about how you're going to prosper. By the answer is better found in you just taking care, sharing the good news, finding out what you can do to help your neighbor, and you'll never be in want of those financial needs again. I'm never going to say that you're going to be sitting on a beach sipping Mai Tais. That would be low carbohydrate, of course, and doing nothing for the rest of your life. That's a terrible thing. I want you to be working diligently, hard at spreading this wonderful news. There's so many, millions, in fact, billions of people that need it. So that's who we've been. Who we are is 3Believe, spreading the word through you. Now, we started in our pre-launch in January. And since that time, we've been doing a lot of heavy lifting to convert it over to a new division of the company. And we have over 200 people that have joined in our pre-launch time. No marketing. You've received no help from me. I haven't given you any marketing material. We just barely produced a brochure for you. We haven't produced any videos. We don't have any grand openings. You've done that all by word of mouth. And in fact, it all started with one humble gentleman by the name of Merv. He found out about it first, told a person, and before you know it, we're at 212 people as of today, I believe. That's a pretty substantial feat. Now, I will tell you something that is rather impressive. There are some wonderful multi-level companies around. We are not one of them. We are a direct sales or a networking company, not an MLM. Nothing to put the MLMs down. However, not many of them can boast of the numbers that we have. We're over 94% retention since the day we started. In 7 months. That is amazing. That is amazing. You know what the average time that someone's even involved in an MLM is just under 2 months, and the average person enrolls 2.4 people in that period of time. Our average is greater than that. You've done more than that, and the average transaction price is just under $44 is what the national numbers are per person. So that's, you know what ours is? You know what the 3B, you know what you have done? The average number is $224.73 every month from 93% of you. That is amazing. That's amazing. I'm telling you, you've got the cat by the tail here, and you're going to be spreading some wonderful, wonderful news. So, what is 3Believe about? Well, I told you that it's about overcoming the symptoms of metabolic syndrome. And inside of metabolic syndrome, there's all kinds of things that we can talk about. Well, we can talk about weight, losing fat. We can talk about high blood pressure and cholesterol. We can talk about digestive disorders and fibromyalgia and inflammation. We can talk about cognitive thinking. We can talk about the quality of sleep, the energy level. We can talk about so many things. But tonight we're going to talk about one particular topic, and that's going to be about diabetes. It is a terrible disease. And so I'm going to go right into that. Now, many people take a medication called metformin. This metformin is designed to inhibit the liver's production of glucose. There is some scholarly debate about exactly what it is that metformin does, oddly enough, but that's not too surprising with a lot of medications. But most researchers agree that in most people, metformin suppresses the production of glucose and the release of the glucose that's in the body, which is known as glycogen. That's stored in the liver and stored in your muscles. Now, if you remember from previous webinars, it is the liver's tendency to dump additional glucose into the bloodstream when the insulin response is weak. Meaning when your pancreas is weak, it has a tendency to dump it into any supply of glucose that's sitting in the liver. It'll kind of help out the pancreas and dump it into the bloodstream to give the body an extra shot of energy, which will cause the blood sugar to shoot up after a meal. The liver may also dump glucose into the bloodstream early in the morning when fasting levels are low. Now, metformin may lower fasting blood sugar by limiting the liver's production of glucose rather than making cells more sensitive to insulin. Now, I want you to remember that point because through this stuff I'm going to read you today, that is critical. There is a yo-yo effect that happens in our body between how much insulin our pancreas is producing and how sensitive our cells are to receiving that insulin. And there are some people that mistakenly, even physicians, that mistakenly will prescribe metformin to make the cells more sensitive to insulin. That's not what it does. In fact, a mouse study that was done a few years ago suggests that metformin works to lower the blood sugar by directly stimulating a gene that's sitting there in the liver, which is how it shoots up the glucose production, and rather than improving the insulin sensitivity. Now, there's a couple of ways that we can identify insulin sensitivity. You can call it the lack or the opposite of insulin resistance, okay, or having your cells reject insulin. It's all meaning the same thing. Now, let's talk about just one particular type at first of diabetes called type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is generally developed later in life, when we're an adult. Usually it has been the case is in your late 30s or 40s and older. Now, a sad trend is that our youth are becoming type 2 diabetics. This has never been seen before in the history of mankind. We have right now, by the year 2025, our children, it is estimated that 1/3, 34% of our children will be a type 2 diabetic. Okay, where in the world are we getting these type 2 diabetics? What sudden disease happened that make this occur? Well, I told you in the beginning, we ate our way into being subjects of type 2 diabetes. We can eat our way back out. It is what we're feeding our children. That's why they're becoming type 2 diabetics. It's horrible. So type 2 diabetics or type 2 results from consuming too much hard fats or saturated fats, refined sugars and starches, and too few of vitamins and minerals. They're often accompanied by cardiovascular complications, which has caused millions of deaths and will cause millions more. Among them, diabetes is one, and blindness can occur, blocking the circulation of the extremities, and heart attacks are all a result of impaired circulation, are symptoms of this fatty degeneration. Now, I'm going to be talking about something else. I asked you to pay attention to insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity. I'm also going to be talking about fat, healthy fats, essential fats. Now, I want you to be thinking about, why does insulin and insulin sensitivity and fatty acids have so much to do with my talk on diabetes? It is everything to do with it. Now, studies show, I'll tell you right now, that metformin blocks and inhibits our body's ability to process essential fatty acids. That's not good news at all. And I'll talk about why that's such a big deal a little bit later on. So now diabetes is one of the easiest of incurable diseases, and it is even easier to prevent. Now, I'm not going to say that our program will cure or prevent type 2 diabetes. Why do I say that? Because the FDA would not be happy with us. However, I can say that through diet, the proper diet, a ketogenic diet, it has clinically been proven that you can reverse type 2 diabetes. I just can't say that our program will do it, but I can say that a ketogenic, low carbohydrate, fat adaptive diet will reverse it and prevent it. That I can say. So, high carb levels in your diet make essential fatty acids, also known as EFAs, present in fatty tissues unavailable to our body. Now, EFAs have an insulin-sparing effect, indicating the effectiveness of insulin. In fact, dietary omega-3 fatty acids, okay, in other words, just omega-3, decreases the amount of insulin needed by diabetics. Now, I have read some silly advice, some experts that have suggested that omega-3 fatty acids should not be used by diabetics, both type 1 and type 2, because they make our cells too sensitive to insulin. Now, I'm going to repeat that. There are experts, doctors, that are saying that you should, if you're a diabetic, should not take omega-3 because that added amount of fatty acids will make your cells more sensitive to the insulin and require you to take less of it. Now, why in the world would they want to suggest that? Well, because they say that it makes it harder for you to regulate how much metformin you need to take, or also insulin that you need to take. Let's remember that a diabetic then it will inject less insulin than the usual amount if they take additional omega fat blend in their diet. Now, isn't it, the reason why I call it silly is, isn't it the whole goal of a diabetic to lower the amount of insulin that they should be taking? And if you take something and it lowers your insulin, it is possible to lower it to 0, and then wouldn't the diabetes be cured? Isn't that the whole goal? Isn't that the treatment protocol that they should be looking after? Well, doctors do not argue that omega-3 is effective in that. They just tell you shouldn't be taking it because of, well, it lowers insulin levels. Now, that just is crazy to me. So, I want to talk about something else that relates to diabetes. Some of you have heard me say that the Alzheimer's disease, by many, want to be called, or is called, type 3 diabetes, or diabetes of the brain. Now, I'm going to read a little bit from a paper. This one is dated 2012. Now, it was first came out with the study in 2005. So it's been around. This idea has been around for a while. This isn't just Jason talking here. This is, I'm going to read from several clinical studies. Here's one. The idea that Alzheimer's might be type 2 diabetes has been around since 2005. But the connection between poor diet and Alzheimer's is becoming more convincing, as summarized in a cover story in the New Scientist journal entitled Food for Thought, What You Eat May Be Killing Your Brain. But for the record, not all carbohydrates are evil. It's just the amount of them. So the studies are increasingly persuasive. They're undeniable and unsurpassing when you understand that the role of insulin and what it is in the body. A type 1 diabetic, which the immune system destroys insulin producing cells in the pancreas. Now, that's only about 10% of all the diabetics that are out there. So when you hear about diabetes, only 10% of the population are type 1 diabetic. Now, type 1 and type 2 are not the same thing. A type 1, you're usually born with it. or you develop it very young in life and still in adolescence. And what it is your immune system attacks the beta cells in your pancreas that make insulin in your body. Now, not all diabetics lose all the beta cells. Some of them do produce some insulin on their own, but they just need extra. Now, type 2 diabetes is different. It's a chronic or an environmental issue, and it is especially prevalent in populations that, well, overconsume foods, the ratio of too many carbohydrates. It is becoming more and more prevalent, as I talked about, and it is just as deadly. The difference is that it's curable. Type 1, as it is right now, is not curable, right? So, diabetes causes many complications. They include heart disease, which remains the nation's #1 killer, by the way. And when our cells in your brain become insulin resistant, you start to lose memory and become disoriented, and you start losing some aspects of your personality, and you can't remember. In short, you develop Alzheimer's. Now, the first stages of Alzheimer's is dementia, right? You become disoriented. Now, did you catch something I said? We, in our body, when we start having type 2 diabetes and also metabolic syndrome, our cells in our body are resistant to insulin. Well, Alzheimer's, all that is our brain cells become resistant to insulin. That's why they associate it to type 3 diabetes or diabetes of the brain. It's essentially the same thing as cellular insulin resistance. So they believe that it's a protein called a beta amyloid, builds up plaques that gets in our neural pathways, and it causes all kind of problems. Now, we're not going to go into the science of that, but we're going to talk about the fact that Alzheimer's may have the same root or an overconsumption of these foods. That's what the studies are pointing at. They're actually linking it to a lifetime of overproduction or overconsumption of carbohydrates, and a lack of fatty acids looks to be the primary cause. They've also done studies that if you get the first symptoms of dementia, you change your diet to a ketogenic diet and you can reverse the symptoms. That is absolutely amazing. That is amazing. So, if you have anyone that has developed dementia and Alzheimer's in the beginning stages, and if you give them some 3B plus or some 3B of their protocol, the meal replacement, will they be cured of Alzheimer's? Well, you're not going to trick me. I'm not going to say yes. But I will tell you it's not going to do them any harm, and it would qualify for a high ketogenic, low carbohydrate, fat, adaptive diet, as the studies have been based on. And so it is likely that you'll receive similar results. It is not impossible at all. How many people are suffering from Alzheimer's? Now, this report was, 4 or 5 years ago, and at that time, there were 5.5 million people with Alzheimer's. It is growing very, very fast. There's a lot of people. So this is a major issue. How then do you ward yourself away from getting Alzheimer's disease? You don't want to get this. In fact, a horrible story I heard. I went to 4th of July. God bless America. And hopefully you have a flag that you put out in your yard. We have one that our Boy Scouts hand out every year, and then we keep it in our house through the summer, and then post it out on our lawn. Thank you very much, young men. And so we went to this firework, and I met a friend that had told me about an old acquaintance of mine. Now, he's my age. He's 55. His wife is the same age, 55 years old, and she already has dementia. She walked up to her to say hello, to greet her, to give her a hug, and she did not recognize her. 55. It is a tragic thing. The best gift you can give them is some of these studies and simply say, The science is very, very strong and will not hurt them, but reduce the amount of carbohydrates and force the brain to live off ketones instead of insulin. Now, why is that? What these studies say. So I'm gonna um, uh, skip a lot of the science here, but basically what happens is that glucose oxidizes really easy in the bloodstream. And that oxidation can lead to the DNA damage in the cells. When your brain is living on nothing but glucose all the time, so when you're sucking on that big gulp, when you're taking a carbohydrate snack throughout the day, snacking on chips, snacking on zero fat food but high carbs, what is happening is you're developing insulin resistance in the brain cells, and they cannot get they'll start to not receive the glucose in the brain. Now when that happens, the cells are resistant to the insulin, and the absence of insulin to the cells have a seesaw effect, meaning they start to die. This is the challenge. If it gets too much insulin, the brain cells will turn away and not accept the insulin, and yet if it doesn't get insulin, they start to die. Here's the secret balance. Our Creator made our bodies to have a reception in moderation of its nutrients, not too much of a good thing. We should get the right amount. And so normally our brains would go back and forth with glucose and ketones. Remember, what is a ketone? A ketone is a source of energy, one of which your brain can only live on a certain kind of fatty acid and glucose and ketones. Well, when you burn stored fat or you burn fatty acids in your diet, we call that fat adaptive, then your brain can live off those ketones. Well, studies have not found at all that ketones will make your body cells or your brain cells resistant in any way. It does not have the same effect that glucose does. Very, very interesting. Now, why is this a big deal? Any of you that have diabetes, I want you to know, I'm not saying this to scare you or any of those that you love that have diabetes, but according to research from Penn State University, people with diabetes are 50 to 65% more at risk of developing Alzheimer's. You heard me right, 50 to 65% more likely to develop Alzheimer's just by being a type 2 diabetic. It's because you're already on your way to being insulin resistant in your brain. Do not let it happen, please. It's a simple change in your diet. Let's cut down those carbs. Let's fortify our body with these essential fatty acids. You got to have a right balance. Go to a place where you know that they're doing that. I might recommend one, but you want to have at least twice as many omega-3s as you have omega-6s. And that's what the brain processes most effectively. And so the study found from Penn State, interestingly enough, is that glucose also alters the dopamine function. Now, dopamine is a neurotransmitter. It's responsible for your memory, your focus, your cognitive concentration, and a precursor to all your energy. So dysfunctional dopamine levels mean that it's also linked to depression, ADD, ADHD, even gambling addiction, drug addiction, and schizophrenia. So what it again drops our dopamine by having too much insulin resistant at the brain cells. Don't do it. Just resist having that much in your body. Okay? So the studies went on to show that insulin resistant links to dopamine may explain why ketogenic diets are useful therapeutic tool. I'm reading right from the study from Penn State. A useful therapeutic tool when treating diseases of cognitive decline and schizophrenia. Theoretically speaking, Maybe a ketogenic diet reverses insulin resistance in the brain and brings the symptoms back to normal. Wow. What a statement. What a great finding. Now, I have prepared here page after page of more information of why it is so important for us to focus on this type of protocol. Now, those of you that are diabetic, especially those that are type 1, your doctor told you a lot of information, and some of it has been forgotten. But one thing you didn't forget about is something called ketoacidosis. It is deadly for you. It doesn't hurt me at all because I'm not type 1 diabetic. And the rest of you that are not type 1 diabetic, you don't have to worry about it, because diabetic ketoacidosis, also known as DKA, only occurs with a type 1 diabetic or a severe alcoholic. What happens it basically is that your glucose levels drop so far and your insulin levels are insufficient to produce a transference of the glucose to your cells, and your blood becomes too acidic. That's where that ketoacidosis comes into. And then those levels can rise high enough where you can die. Okay? So you don't want to get up over 35, 45. And when you're in our protocol, for example, so you can set a kind of a meter, you're in a high level of ketosis, of ketones, between 4 and 6 milliliters or milligrams per milliliter. Once you hit about 35, 45, right in that range is where danger zone. That's 10 times lower than where you have to worry about it. It's just the body chemistry is not possible unless you're a type 1 diabetic. So, does that mean that a type 1 diabetic cannot be on our protocol? Absolutely not. In fact, you'll find that you'll have the same results that I talked about earlier. We want your cells to become more sensitive to insulin. If your cells are more sensitive, you take less insulin. That means you last longer. That means your cells will not turn on you as soon. And that is a reality that every diabetic faces, or should I say type 1 diabetic. And so that's what will happen. Will our program cure type 1 diabetics? Absolutely not. Studies don't even support that a high ketogenic diet will cure a type 1 diabetic, but it can greatly improve the quality of their life. It will normalize their blood sugar level from bouncing all over the place. That's what a diabetic has to face all the time, is how much is my blood sugar level going to rise after I eat this food, and how many units of insulin do I got to take to counteract it? It's a gamble. They don't know exactly how much. They have ranges because so much goes into it. It is not a good time. They wake up in the middle of the night, their blood sugar level is way too low, they don't feel good, they got to take a shot of glucose, and they hope that they didn't take too much, or when they wake up, it's going to be their blood sugar is going to be too high, then they got to take more insulin, and it's just a vicious cycle. So, for your type 1 diabetic friends, our protocol is very, very productive. You just do what we call on our alternative plan. They take a little bit more sugars, carbohydrates, I should say, and they have 6 meals a day instead of 3. Or should I say 6 of our shakes instead of 3. It's very effective. I've worked with many diabetics that had insulin pumps. They're taking many units of insulin throughout the day, taking 3 different medications, got them off of all but one, which is the insulin, and cut their insulin usage by 2/3. Yeah, that's tremendous. Not only does it save them money, but they feel wonderful. So that's the life that they can expect in a ketogenic fat adaptive diet. Type 2 diabetics need fatty acids. All right. The studies from Brown University is that if the brain is struggling to use glucose, why is it not immediately shift to fueling from ketones? Well, it can't make that conversion that fast. And the answer is that insufficient or sufficient ketones simply are not available because the body's not in ketosis. And that's due to differing requirements of various different tissues in the body. The body has a whole run on glucose, fatty acids, and ketones. But when they are insulin resistant, that ketone production is shut down, which means that for you to be in a high level ketosis, you need the fatty acids. Where you get the fatty acids in the right formula? From the omega oil that we're providing you every single month. It took me almost a year and a half of daily research and study of work to get that balance of the oil just right, based on clinical studies. Now, I didn't just come up with a number that sounded good. I researched it and found the studies that were peer-reviewed, double-blind-sided human studies that told what that balance should be. And that's why I have the amounts of oil, or the types of oil and the amounts in it. It is wonders for a diabetic. And so all of you should be taking it, but especially a diabetic. So let's talk about some nutritional therapies as published by Brown University on how to prevent Alzheimer's. And you'll find this interesting, or I hope that you do. So I'm going to read now. It says the damage observed in Alzheimer's brains is complex and multifractional. Any intervention intended to delay or possibly reverse the damage should therefore be a multi-pronged strategy designed to address as many of the contributing factors as possible. The majority of these potentially helpful practices are nutritional, but two can be considered lifestyle modifications. Obviously, the foundation of what might be considered an anti-Alzheimer's strategy is a reduced carbohydrate diet. We've already talked about that. Beyond that, there are numerous nutritional supplements that could be effective based on their biochemical functions. Don't you love how research labs write? Just like, who talks like this? My wife is nodding and pointing. I talk like this. I'm sorry. I'll throw some slang in there. Shucks and dang and fiddly dee. Okay, the first one on the list, chromium picolinate. Chromium is required for proper function of the insulin receptor, and it has been proven to be an aid to glucose regulation and insulin sensitivity. Guess what we put in your shake? At clinical doses, by the way, chromium picolinate. Not synthetic, by the way. It is from a whole food source, coupled with a bioprine, which increases the absorbability of chromium by more than 700%. If it's not there, if that form that I put in there, you're absorbing 700% less. That's what you mean to me. That's why I put it in there. The next one, zinc. Insulin degrading enzyme requires zinc as a cofactor. Yes, we put zinc in there at the clinical dose. High quality cod liver oil. Now I don't put cod liver oil, but I do put the balance of omega-6 to omega-3. And they quote, the balance of omega-6 and omega-3 ratio to decrease inflammation. You've heard me talk about that. Generally, oils rich in omega-6 acids induce, or should I say increase, inflammation in the body, while omega-3 stimulates anti-inflammatory pathways. The ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 in the modern American diet is estimated to be as high as 30 to 1. You've heard me say 23 to 1. While our evolutionary dietary pattern suggests that we are physiologically suited to a ratio closer to 3 to 1. So that's why I give you 2.5 to 1. Some complain that I should make it higher. Well, we will have an additional oil that will be nothing but omega-3, and you can bump that up as you need it. That's coming soon. Oops. I let one out of the bag. Yeah. All right. Additionally, dietary imbalances of these fatty acids cause imbalances in their incorporation into cellular and or cellular membranes, resulting in altered permeability and increased vulnerability to lipid proliferation and peroxidation. Okay, what that basically means is that it increases your chance of having cellular breakdown as well as the membrane, which would include the mitochondria, which is the brain of your cells, because of oxidation. And that oxidation is what makes your bananas turn black and your food rot. So we have the same problem at cellular level too. The next one on their list, MCTs, medium chain triglycerides. That's in the oil that I give you. Oh, by the way, the cod liver oil, well, that's in the formula that I talked about in the omega oil. These saturated fatty acids found mostly in coconut and palm kernel oils, I give you both, are metabolized different than other oils and can serve as a source of ketones. Just what we want, even in the absence of carbohydrate restriction. So what I'm doing for you is, even if you're in a lower level of ketosis, when you take my oil, I put you in a higher level of ketosis because of the balance of the MCT that I'm giving you. Christmas came early. Every time you take some of that oil, it's like, you know, your birthday all over again. L-carnitine, I provide that in your formula of the powder as well. This is an amino acid, and it's required by of the enzyme responsible for moving, carrying fatty acids into the mitochondria, as well as other enzymes in the breakdown of fats. So you got to have it to break down and digest these fats. This is really, really important. Okay, coenzyme Q10. Now, this is the vital member of the mitochondria electron transport system. Therefore, it is also a precursor to the generation of ATP. That's energy. As we get older, we lose the ability to make ATP. Now, I give you high doses of ATP production in every shake. I'm giving you that part. I don't give you CoQ10. And the reason why is because it's highly susceptible to oxidation. And some of the other ingredients that I give it to you in, it would, while it's sitting there in the bag, it would degrade and fall apart and not do you any good. So I have been formulating a separate coenzyme Q10 that you'll take as a separate supplement. And the tests so far are amazing. I'll tell you more about it later, but just trust me, it's super duper. The next one on the list is antioxidants. Now they say that in addition to increasing antioxidant-rich foods in the diet, supplementation of your N-acetylcysteine or glutathione regeneration is helpful. I give you loads and loads of different sources of antioxidants right there in the powdered shake. And then what I don't give you is physical activity. They encourage you to do that. They encourage you to do stress reduction. But the reason why they're telling you to reduce your stress, I want you to listen to this. This is interesting. To lower your levels of cortisol. Now, cortisol is a stress hormone that you have. That's that fight or flight hormone. So when I'm sneaking around the house to find my wife, to sneak up and scare her, and she jumps 6 to 12 inches off the ground, her levels of cortisol just increased. All right? Because there's the fight or flight. So what's happening there is she's fighting and I'm flighting because I don't want to get smacked around. So cortisol is an antagonist to burning stored fat. It also increases your stress and ages you. It's not good. So I put a clinically proven anti-cortisol reducer right in the shake. So I can't control whether you're meditating at home. I can't do that. But I can lower your cortisols by 35% every time you take my shake. And that's what the study says that it does. And yes, I give it to you at the clinical level dose that they said had to be there. So I am doing that one. The next one is B12. B12 is not necessarily required for a therapeutic diet for ADHD, but it's important to note that memory loss and cognitive decline are insidious signs of long-term B12 deficiency. And if, by the way, you should know that if you take metformin, it is one of the side effects, though there are many, is that metformin attacks, and I think the last study I read is 73% of people that are on metformin had a B12 deficiency as well as a zinc deficiency. So I'm giving you a full dose of B12. So I'm putting that in there as well. So it goes on to say that an extreme diet may cure you of type 2 diabetes. So hopefully, I pray that this was useful. So any of your diabetic friends should be aware of this good news. They do not have to have type 2 diabetes. It is purely their choice. You give them this information, and now it's their choice whether they want to continue to have it. Type 1s, they're stuck with it. But they do not have to have the quality of life that they presently have. It can be better. They will feel better. They'll have a better energy, better cognitive thought. The list goes on if they're on a ketogenic diet. So I would recommend that they at least have this information, that you give it to them, and then let them know that our program is one of the many that is very that can help them with this solution. We're not the only one, but I like to believe that we're the best one because we have the cleanest products, that I can say, the most pure, and there is not another formula on the planet yet that can compete with our formulation. They just simply don't put the ingredients in, and they don't put the quality ingredients, nor do they put the dosage amount that we do. That's why I can say what I just said. And so it's not going to hurt them, and it has been my experience in every case that it will help them. So pass that information on. I am done with my diabetic speech. Hopefully it was entertaining, if not informational. And let me turn on my speakers here. Mr. Mervin.
Yes, sir.
Do you know of any testimonies? I did not get any in my email for this evening to read, and that's why I didn't open one off. Do you have any testimonies that you know of or information?
Oh, no. I've had a lot of vocal testimonies, but nothing written.
Okay.
What about the brochures? You mentioned the brochures. Are they available yet? And if not, so when? And the cost. Do you have any idea on that?
You know, I spent some extra time gathering up my paperwork for our presentation on diabetes, and I forgot or did not take the opportunity to ask where the brochure was at. I assumed that the printer had not got back with us, or I would have received that email or that communication. So I will make a note. My associate here sitting next to me, and ask them to make sure that they follow up and get me that information. Next question.
Yeah, that's all I had. Any questions?
Yeah, I got one.
Yes, sir.
I got one to add with that. This is Bob Price. And on that brochure, I checked with the printer myself, and for the cost of the printer, it was going to be $1.80, something like that, to get it all done somewhat for them. And I was hoping that if you do a multiple or do a large amount, hopefully the cost will be down a little bit. And of course, yours would be more professionally done, I'm sure, compared to what we could put together. I think it'd be more cost effective that way.
Did you say $1.80?
Yeah, $1.80 to almost $2 per brochure. And even with that, it wasn't, to me, I didn't think the quality that I think they should be.
That is, I can absolutely, quantifiably guarantee that our price will be substantially lower than that. I think the last do you remember?
I don't know.
They were less than 25 cents a piece. in the
That's
quotes.
that's
So
that's awesome.
yeah, it'll
That's
be
awesome.
so it'll be substantially lower. Don't pay $1.80. That's just wow. That's too high. Too high.
Well, I thought so too, and I thought if you buy the quantity, I'd love to buy 50 to 100 of them right now.
Yeah, I will. I'll push them on that. Get you an answer for next week. Any other questions from the field?
Any other questions, anybody?
Yes, I have one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, this is John from Minnesota. If a person has type 1 diabetes, the difference between 1 and 2 for the program is they just take 6 shakes a day versus 3 with the oil, or what was it?
Okay, that's a good question. So what I want you to do for all type 1s is that you this will be available. The page will be available on the website. It'll be called the alternative phase. The other phases are phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. So for a type 1 diabetic or a severe type 2, they should use the alternative phase. And on that phase, do we have one? You might hand that to me? Oh, wait a minute. Maybe I can reach it. Let me just show you those that are on the webinar. Those that aren't, follow the link that you'll get tomorrow. This is what it looks like. So it's purple in color. The rest of them will be, hand me that one of the blue ones, would you please? I'm sorry. So you can tell the difference. All the other phases will be blue, like this one, okay? Regardless whether it being phase 1 through phase 4. But the diabetic or alternative phase will be purple, okay? And so the difference is that you'll get 6 shakes a day instead of 3. That doesn't mean you're getting twice as much food. It just means you're getting them twice as often. Instead of eating every 4.5 to 5 hours, you're eating every 2 to 2.5 hours. Now you'll notice down here in the corner of this phase, there's an emblem here that you just don't see on our phase 1. And that looks like a little tiny apple. That's because they get fruit or carbohydrates in smaller amounts than they're normally used to, but we don't want them to approach the ketosis or ketoacidosis at all, and that's what will prevent that from happening. And so here's all the instructions down below that tells them when they should eat it, how much they should have. They should always do it in conjunction with their physician or their specialist that they're working with. But this has been a great solution for so many diabetics. So this is also, it's all backed and supported by medical science. So this is not just my opinion. It is a good, reasonable medical approach to it. Also, it's not unusual where I will recommend that a type 1 diabetic will use 2 to 3 times more oil than their non-diabetic counterpart, simply because of all the material that I read to you tonight. As they are, the medications they're taking is prohibiting the breakdown and absorption of omega fats, mainly omega-3. And omega-3 is awesome for making the body more sensitive to the insulin, requiring less of it, and that is all great news. Good question. Did that answer your question completely?
Jason? Yes, thank you very much.
You bet.
Jason, I have a question, if I may. Dean of Iowa.
Absolutely.
In number 2 diabetics, using your program, as compared to those who have been using it mainly on a weight loss program, even though it benefits many other things, do they gradually get to the point where the body becomes attuned to a better diet and not have to take as much of this product, or should they always stick with it?
Okay, that's a good question. So let me turn off the sound here. The question was, those that may not heard, is once, regardless of whether people are losing weight on the protocol or they're using it for other reasons, let's say for a diabetic, or they're doing it for inflammation, or they're doing it to improve their digestive quality, or for to be a better athlete. He asked, will you have to continually take this product after you heal yourself, so to speak? After you start feeling better and you fix those problems, will you have to continue to be on the product? Well, I'm going to be a little bit of a smart aleck here for a second, but let me explain why. That's kind of like, all right, you come to me and I'm a swimming coach, and you say to me, I want to do the backstroke and I want to do it faster than anybody else in town. So teach me how to do the backstroke, and I want to be fast. And so I tell you, all right, you got to do this and you got to do that, and you got to lift these kind of weights and do these kind of exercises, and you got to eat these kind of foods. And you plop in the pool, and a year later, you are screaming through that water. You're like Aquaman, or not to be sexist, you're Aqua Woman. And then you come out of the pool and you say to me, now, in order for me to maintain the same speed that I have, do I have to continue to work out and do all the things you told me to? And the answer is yes. If you want the same results, you got to do the same activity. So to a certain degree, yes, you do need to be on the protocol to get the same results. Now, the protocol is not necessarily the product. Let me explain what that is. So what we're doing is that when you have the symptoms of metabolic syndrome, it's kind of like you broke your ankle. And so I'm going to put a cast on that ankle and restrict it so that those bones will set and the ligaments will heal, all right? The tendons will all tighten back up, to a certain measure. And so I'm not going to have you go running while you have this cast on. Well, that cast is mimicking your phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. I'm going to restrict your diet. I'm going to change it while you're being healed, while you're overcoming symptoms of metabolic syndrome, fixing your pancreas, fixing your liver, fixing your digestive system, and fixing your cells from being insulin resistant. Okay? That's what it's doing. Well, then after you're done with that, then you can go out and you can start running around. Meaning, after that, you can start consuming carbohydrates again. But if you go back to consuming as many carbohydrates as you were, which is the average a man eats 455 grams a day, if you go back to eating that much, you're going to get the same thing you got before you started the protocol. But if you go back to consuming, I recommend no more than 150, ideally 100 to 120 a day, then you can maintain the success that you got from taking my product. It's just easier to consume my product because I got all your vitamins and minerals and all the stuff that I gave you a list for, and maintain your success in one shake that, well, it's inexpensive. It's cheap. You can't get it anywhere else, all those benefits for the cost I'm giving you. But you could go and mimic the nutritional value in the grocery store and just buy all those things separately. So yes, you can achieve the results without taking our product for the rest of your life. It will be harder, and it will be harder to find all ingredients. It'll be more time consuming, and it will cost you more money, but yes, you can do it. Did that answer your question, sir?
Yes, you answered it very, very well, succinctly.
Good. I have been accused of giving long answers for short, little questions, and I'm sorry. I don't know any other way to be than
we finally get the message.
exacting language. That's what I try to do. One last question, because the first one just wasn't a real question.
Jason, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
If you are got high sugar on the product do you stay on that, or do you get off of it? My sugar's running about 300.
Okay, say that just one more time.
What number should I be using? My sugar's real high. I got a sugar up to about 300, and I'm trying to bring it down. I'm at 22. How long should I stay on the P22?
Okay, so the question is that you have blood sugar level at 300? Is that right?
Yes.
And that's in the morning, or is that?
Yes.
Okay, that's a fasting blood sugar level.
That's in the morning.
Okay. For the rest of you,
Yes.
300 is way too high. A perfect blood sugar level, and hopefully, just let me educate everybody if I may, is perfect is 75 to 85. This gentleman is 300. So that is higher than it should be. The good news is that the body can respond and lower that down. He asked about what formula should he be on and for how long. Well, what I want you to do is I want you to be on phase 20 or P22 for 4 weeks. Now that's based on 3 shakes a day. Let me ask you, are you a type 1 or type 2? Are you a type 1 or type 2 diabetic?
I'm a type 2.
Okay. All right. So the good news is that he doesn't have to be a type 2 forever. This is great news. I'm excited. So you can overcome where you never see those 300s again. So type 2 for P22 formula for 30 days. Now you got to change from P22 to at least P6, and the reason why is one of the things that I put in each formula is I'm giving you a huge dose of 15 different digestive enzymes and probiotics. And the reason I'm giving you that is a whole bunch of reasons I won't go into, but one of the side effects that happens is that you're going to be able to digest the proteins that you're getting more efficiently, more effectively. You're going to get more of them at your cells. And you don't need that many. You need that many in the beginning because you're not digesting all of them. So I give you more protein in the P22. So change to the P6 because after a month, you're digesting more of those proteins and you can live on at least a P6. I take P3. My lean body mass is about 189 pounds. I'm going to guess that mine might be a little higher than yours. And so you could probably go to a P3, but start with a P6. If you get more proteins than you should, more than your body needs, those amino acids will break down into a glucose, and then your body will store it as a fat, and that could kick you out of ketosis, and we don't want that, okay? So we don't want more proteins than we need, and so change to a P6. If your sugar levels are that high, I would recommend for you at least for 2 to 4 weeks be doing the alternative program. Then you'll switch from the alternative to just the regular phase 1 of the protocol. And then if you want more information, please email support@3believe.com and tell them you talked to me on the webinar, and I can make sure that you get additional information as you progress through the protocol. How's that?
Good. Thank you.
What was your first name?
That's good.
Dale.
Dale. D-A-L-E?
Yes,
Perfect.
from Michigan.
All right, I'll remember that. Thank you very much for coming on. I think that was 3 questions, Merv, right?
Sounds good.
All right,
Great.
boys and girls, I'm proud of you. You've done a great job. Now, I'm going to tease you just a little bit. There's 212 of you out there, and I have not received 212 testimonies. For heaven's sakes, sharing is caring. I want you to share with me. Tell me your stories. I don't find them boring. I find them wonderful. I don't use wallpaper in my house. You know what I do is I take your testimony and I put them side by side, and I cover my walls with them. That's the most beautiful wallpaper I've ever seen. So please share them with me. I care and love you and appreciate your efforts. And for tonight, I sign off until next week.
Thank you.
Good call. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good call. God bless you.
And you.
Bye-bye.
Good night, Chuck.